Hey everyone, Dan with HRT, and today we want to talk to you about some medical equipment, specifically focusing on tourniquets. And we brought in Scott from TriMed Tactical here, and Scott's going to really give us a rundown and bring some of his wealth of knowledge in to show what we've got here. So Scott, you want to give an introduction for yourself?
Yeah, my name's Scott Osborne. I've been in the medical service about 20 years. Started out in the National Guard, joined the Army in '03, 21 years this August. I'm a captain EMS coordinator at the fire department in Portsmouth. And as a part of the department there, work on the SWAT team with the PD and with the U.S. Marshals as one of their medics there. Also on a company called TriMed Tactical, and we just specialize in SWAT training, SWAT medical training.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Want to show us some tourniquets?
Absolutely. Let's look at some tourniquets. You got a nice variety of them here. There's certainly some favorites of mine. And we'll just maybe start on this end and work our way down. What we have here is the SAM tourniquet. Anyone in the EMS field, pre-hospital medicine field, is going to be familiar with the SAM company, where they make they make some junctional tourniquets as well. They've also made the splints for years. Probably was their introduction to EMS. But then they got into the tourniquet field, and after some trial and error, they came up with one here that I like. It would be definitely one of my top three. This actually came out of my kit, so I carry this. And some nice things about here, about this tourniquet. I like the width of it. And the nice thing about the SAM tourniquet is when you apply this tourniquet, it's fashioned in such a way that the entire width of the band is applying pressure. And that's not the case in a lot of tourniquets. A lot of tourniquets have your band set up here, and then the strap that actually creates the pressure is a strap that runs in the middle of that band. Mm-hmm. So you actually don't get the full width of pressure from that band. The one unique thing about the SAM tourniquet is going to be this buckle right here. And the way that works is, as you run this piece up through here, as you run the band up through there, as you pull back on it, it reaches a certain amount of pressure, and you're going to hear an audible click. And what that does, and as you may have noticed on this band, there's a series of holes on each side. What that does is it passes two prongs up into those holes and kind of keeps that tourniquet from backing off. And to release it, you have a simple release lever right here. You just lift up and you return it to place. If I had one thing to say, not necessarily negative, but something I would improve on the tourniquet is I agree that, and it's widely thought and widely discussed amongst my team, that this tends to activate just a little bit early. So, one of the things we teach when you apply a tourniquet is take as much of that slack out of there as you can. Mm-hmm. That way it limits the number of times you have to twist to get good occlusion on the artery. In this case, this might activate just a little bit soon, so you're going to have a few more turns of the windlass to get the pressure that you want. But outside of that, I think it's a very nice tourniquet. It's a good tourniquet. It definitely works, and it's certainly something I don't mind carrying on my kit myself.
It's a cool setup.
Yeah.
I like the locking tabs in there. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's a unique thing to SAM. And they incorporate, like when you start talking about their junctional tourniquets and things like that, they basically build from this platform. So you're going to find the same mechanisms on their junctional tourniquet as you do here. Of course, junctional tourniquets are a whole other discussion, and I think they are still largely being developed and looking for a good one.
Right.
So as we move down the line here, we have our SOF-T. This is certainly one of the preferred tourniquets in the special operations forces, things like that, and for good reason. It's tried, true, combat proven, reliable. It's got the nice aluminum windlass there, your keeper with the triangles here. And it does, I've heard people gripe about, well, you can have the extra step with the screw. It's not that big a deal. It secures very quickly, it secures very easily, and when it's secure, it is secure. It is not backing out of there. If you had a complaint about this years ago, it was a little thin. And when you talk about tourniquets and complaints and things that can be improved on in next generations, almost across the board, someone's going to say, well, can it be thicker? Can it be wider? And the reason for that is, the thinner that band is, the more that's going to hurt as pressure's applied. So the wider, the better. The wider, you also get a little bit more occlusion space on your artery. It just tends to occlude the artery a little bit better, and with a little bit less pain. Now, having said that, we'll trade pain for occluding blood flow no matter what the tourniquet is, right? Right. But in this case, what they did do, they developed, they heard those cries, they heard those complaints, and they came back with a SOF-T wide, which is what we got here. So a good tourniquet, really a tried and true, combat proven. Mm-hmm. Can't go wrong with that. Speaking of combat tried and true and proven, This is, of course, my favorite. I think it's the standard largely across the board. When you see something issued to a team, when you see something issued in the military, I can attest to, unless again you're in the special operations field, it's going to be the CAT tourniquet. Currently up to the Gen 7 tourniquet. Again, this thing is just tried, it's true, it's proven. They've went through so many iterations of this. It was a little thinner at one point. It was a little bit complicated at one time when you had to double thread the buckle, especially when you're talking about occluding a thigh up on the thigh.
Right.
They beefed up the windlass for this one. They beefed up that buckle here at the end, so you don't really have to, double thread it anymore. But again, super simple, and that's the thing about a tourniquet. It's got to be easy to use. It's got to be easy to self-apply.
Right.
It's got to stay in place for the duration, and it's got to be durable. That's some of the key things you're looking for. And again, you just don't go wrong with a CAT tourniquet. Again, it's just so simple to use, beefed up buckle. I think most people are going to be familiar with this if they've been in our field any length of time,
right.
had anything issued to them. They're going to be familiar with this tourniquet, and they're probably going to like it. There's just not much to not like about it anymore. I taught an OPATA course over this past weekend, and I looked at this. I was like, gang, I don't know at this point at the Gen 7 what there is to do to improve on this very much.
Right.
If you really want to nitpick, we talked about the length of the band, and as I was talking about the SAM tourniquet, I mentioned how I like that the width of that band is used throughout the tightening process.
Right.
The CAT tourniquet is one of those that essentially the band is a sleeve here.
Okay.
The strap is a sleeve. And if you look here, what runs down, the functional part, when you start to twist, what runs down into that sleeve is this strap. It's about an inch, maybe a little bit more than an inch wide, but it certainly doesn't equal the width of the band. So as you start to tighten that down, you're going to get this to fold down a little bit, and all that pressure is going to be focused in here. Maybe a little bit of increase in pain, not a big deal. This is, again, if you're talking about a number one tourniquet, in my opinion, it's going to be the CAT Gen 7.
Sure. That's why we threw them on our site for the same reason. It's just, like you said, everyone's familiar with them. We've all seen them. If you've been in most spaces in law enforcement or military side, you've probably gotten one.
Absolutely.
So it makes sense.
Absolutely. And moving on here, this is one I have limited experience with, and as we were speaking before we came on, this caused a lot of controversy early on.
Yes, it did.
Once I finally got my hand on it, and again, as we talked about with the tourniquets here, we talked about the width of the band being pretty important, especially when you talk about pain and occlusion surface.
Right.
You look at this guy, the first thing you're going to notice right away is the size, and two aspects of the size. First of all, if this is meant to truly be an everyday tourniquet or everyday carry, this is what this kind of been billed to be, you love the size right off the rip. It's thin, it's small, it's compact. If these components of it are quite durable, compare that to just a knife you would carry every day in your pocket. So when we do talk about the size of this particular tourniquet, and when you compare it to just like a knife you would carry every day, a 4 or 4.5 inch closed blade knife there, this ETQ produced by Snake Staff Systems, you can see that is, it's not much longer than that. It is certainly thin. So again, getting back to the two aspects of the size of it, it is quite small. It'd be something you could carry every day in your pocket, your pants pocket, your cargo pocket, whatever, and it wouldn't really be a factor, really wouldn't bother you much. But when you look at the second aspect of it, your first concern might be, as we talked about the width of the band, that might be a concern you have. But again, with the limited time I've had with it, I placed it on myself in a couple of different scenarios. The pain wasn't much more than what I experienced maybe with the CAT tourniquet. It was very simple to use. As far as ease of use, it was as simple to use as a CAT, which is a big thing you look at in ease of use. I was able to self-apply it to leg, to arm, no problem there. But having said that, they did probably hear those cries and the chief complaint you hear amongst all tourniquets. So they transitioned and got right back to the drawing board, it appears, and came up with a band here that the width of this band very closely mimicks what you would see on the CAT tourniquet or the SAM tourniquet or any other tourniquet out there. So again, and this thing closes up, man, that's even a little bit smaller there than that closed blade knife at about 4 to 4.5 inches. So
super easy throwing in really any type of pocket or even like a pouch or something like that if you're just throwing one on. Absolutely.
I tell you, I am going to play a little bit more before I pass final determination. but my first impressions of this tourniquet are very, very positive, very positive. One thing that came up, amongst the discussion with my instructors at TriMed, and man, they do have opinions. We were questioning this. We didn't know what that was. Some people thought it was at a level. Now we're, like we joked earlier,
maybe
high and tight and level.
Right.
No, this is, as I've learned today, I'm learning something every day, that's just a chem light. So for dark applications, maybe as you pass this off to a civilian EMT or something like that, it would give them an indication in the dark that, okay, there's a tourniquet placed and that's where it's at. So kind of cool. The components are very beefy. I don't see a true, something that looks like, to me, you can look at some tourniquet and say, that's going to fail. At some point, at some kind of pressure, some point of torque, that is going to fail. This is well constructed. I appreciate the ease of this, of securing this, quite simple. It's not coming out of there and I don't see where it would break. Just a well done tourniquet. But again, we'll play with a little bit more before I would probably carry it on my everyday kit. But it's certainly in the running, and I'm looking forward to looking more at that. So.
We did have those onto our website as well, and we've kind of started a line of EDC items, and I think that's why we did that. Definitely, if you're looking like a duty perspective, that's probably a better call. But if you just need something to throw in a pocket,
absolutely, for every day,
car, things like that. Maybe.
I'm not going to discount that it wouldn't be appropriate for a kit. The more I look at this, especially this wider version. I certainly wouldn't discount that. That's stay tuned for that.
Yeah.
And I know you guys do your due diligence too. I know you wouldn't put on your website if you didn't believe it. So that says a lot to me right off the bat.
Right.
So, now moving on.
Now that one we don't put on the website.
This one?
No.
Thank goodness. Moving on, and this is, I always appreciate the opportunity to talk about this when we're talking about tourniquets. And again, I did teach an OPATA class this past weekend, and I always remain surprised when I see a department that, they state they have budget issues, they have this and that. They tell a person, you should really have this piece of equipment, but they don't supply it.
Right.
So then what often tends to happen is someone will go out to the internet and start to search for these things on their own. And often what happens is they hit the Amazons or something like that. I shop Amazon too, nothing against Amazon, but they hit some kind of internet market, let's say.
Right.
And they find a tourniquet for $13. That is too good to be true, isn't it?
That's a good deal.
In fact, it is too good to be true. So this young fella in my course this past weekend, I asked if anyone had experience with the cat tourniquet. Yeah, I've even got one in my bag. I said, really, do you? So let me see it. And as soon as he tossed it to me, it landed in my hand. I knew immediately it's not a cat tourniquet. It looked the part from a distance, but once you put your hands on it, once you really started to look at it, you could see that it was not a cat tourniquet.
Right.
And there's a couple things you need to look for when you're looking at a tourniquet. And this is showing, I believe this is the exact tourniquet now that I look at this, the one you guys have. First of all, you guys have clearly experimented with this. And first things first, we have a break in the windlass.
Yep.
Very common failing on these cheaper tourniquets that largely they come from overseas. And again, you find them on any internet market. So that's the first real problem you have is the breaking of the windlass once you really get that thing torqued down. If you manage to get this thing torqued down without breaking the windlass, often what we see is once you secure this in here, this is going to rock back and maybe not break, but it's going to become a little less effective and allow a little bit of movement of that windlass when these things start to flex back. They are not very stable at all.
Sure. So you're either going to break a windlass or you're going to lose some of the pressure that you've worked so hard for and then break a windlass trying to fix it.
100%. That's exactly what's going to happen. Something else you're going to see, this is not really secured to this piece here. You got your keeper here. That is just, there's been a hot stamp applied.
Sure.
And that's been driven down on there, and you have a few holes here that's punctured that down. It takes absolutely no effort whatsoever just to peel that off. All right, so that's going to come off quite easily. And something I wasn't prepared for, but when I went to demonstrate, I intended to break that young man's tourniquet on my leg. However, something else about these particular tourniquets is they're much shorter than a standard tourniquet. I did not know that either.
I didn't.
So when we lay this out here, and we might not be able to catch all this on camera, but now this one it is going to be okay with that. But when I compared it to the cat tourniquet I had, it was about 4 to 6 inches short. And I would say it's not the cat tourniquet that's varying in size. These are so inconsistently and so poorly manufactured, and they're made in mass production.
Right.
Some of them are going to come out longer than others. The one I had the other day was so short that I couldn't get it around my thigh to even try to break that guy's tourniquet. So that was another indication that, okay, this thing is not well. And then when you look at these back plates, they are just very, very, very flimsy. So
Right.
very cheaply made. It'll be, the more you look at tourniquets, and I told that young man, it was nothing, nothing he did wrong. He just was trying to get himself equipped, and in the absence of something being issued to him, he was taking his own initiative. I didn't call him out there to embarrass him or anything, but this is something you don't want to place in a life-saving situation. It's certainly going to fail, and then you're going to have bigger problems on your hands. So.
Right. And you discussed there, and I would encourage if you're watching the video, Northern Rescue has a counterfeit guide on their website. And
Absolutely.
You've shared some of that information too. So there's things to look for, like some of the specific patents and seals and inscriptions are
I'm glad you brought
really
that
big to
up,
look
and
up.
I did point this out to the class the other day. A cat tourniquet, if you look at the plate, the pressure plate on the back, it's going to have engraved on there. It's going to be molded in there, cat. It's going to have a lot of information in fine print below it here. When you look at something like this, it's going to be smooth. It's not going to have anything
Right.
on it. Something else you'll see on the strap of a good cat tourniquet is you're going to have some white lettering there, and very often that's going to have a date of manufacture. It's going to have the generation of the cat tourniquet. That's going to be on there.
Right.
As you look over this, obviously you're not going to find that because it's not cat tourniquet.
right.
So yeah, those are definitely some things to look for. No,
And they'll come sealed as well with the instruction, which one of these will come in a pack of 12 with no
and there'll be
information.
just a clear, transparent
Yeah.
packaging, and it'll have nothing inside it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So some telltale signs that we need to look for if we're doing that on our own. Ideally, though, we should be. Hopefully, those guys are getting that stuff issued to them.
Right.
All right. So we'll move right along down here to.
Your favorite? Oh, not yet.
Not yet. Not my favorite yet.
I'll get these on your list.
Sure. Look at our rat tourniquet here. Our rat's tourniquet. This is another controversial one. People that love this talk about how easy it is to use, how secure it is, how durable it is. And the people that hate it, they talk about, again, I mean, look how thin this is. This is not much more, you could argue, than a couple shoelaces width. And we tell our people, when we teach tourniquets, and when we talk about improvised tourniquets, should you ever have to use one, which I hope is never, this day and age, but should you ever have to use an improvised tourniquet, we strictly talk about not using things this thin because of the increase in pain, the lack of occlusion surface area. And certainly, I don't think this is thin enough to create a cutting tool at that point, like a extension cord that we see sometimes, or a bootlace would.
Oh dear.
But this would definitely cause some pain. Our tests at TriMed, we have played with these. We watch students use them, and we do this on purpose to see how they perform with it. It just, in our experience, has not performed well. And really, it didn't take us long to kind of abandon it and keep our experience to a limited. I've never used this in a live situation. I've only used this in training, and just my opinion, I wasn't a big fan, and certainly something I don't think I would place in my kit. So, again, those that love them. That's to each their own, I guess, on that.
Sure. They do, and I don't know if you have any experience with this, they claim that they're like the only tourniquet you use for dogs. So if you have a canine handler, would you ever recommend it for them, or it's still say, oh, let's find something else?
That's a great segue. I'm glad you brought that up.
Okay.
Because what I used to keep in my kit for dogs and small children was our next guy on the list is going to be the SOF-T. And I'll answer your question on that as well.
Sure.
You could argue that. You could argue that it would work on those limbs as well. But what used to be heavily argued, especially once this started to fall out of favor for adult humans, and was, well, keep this in your kit for those dogs and for those small children. I do have as part of our course at TriMed, we have a canine portion. And we have one of the nation's experts, not only in my opinion, many opinions, and Athena House that comes and teaches, and she's from the Dayton area.
Okay.
And,
very cool.
Yeah, and she would, I was talking to her about this, and I told her, that's what I went through, and I was all proud of myself. I was like, man, this makes more sense. I'm not using these on humans, but I'm going to put them in my dog kits, all right? She's like, don't do that. She said, you have the same problem using them on dogs as you do on humans. And part of that problem is, when this gets bloody, sweaty, water, whatever, if anything gets on this thing, it is very hard to manipulate. It's very hard to secure. It's very hard to, they call it the stretch wrap tuck, but if you get it as tight as you need it to get to stop blood flow, it gets very hard to tuck in there. And especially, again, once you start getting bloody hands, and this is another one, we did kind of a test on this with our students. We put this in our bag, and it's the only tourniquet they had in the bag. And we put them into a bloody femoral bleed scenario. In this particular class, the reason we used them was this class was all-stars. It was the May 2022 class that we had. And there's actually a lot of guys from the Dayton area in there as well. But we're in Dayton, so I keep bringing that up.
Right.
But they failed and failed and failed and failed and failed to secure that bleed with a SOF-T. Whereas if they'd had any of these, kind of these all-star tourniquets that we've talked about already, they had been in, out, secured, and moving on to something else. They really, really struggled. And when I talk about this, there's this one guy in particular that I remember, and he was the star of the class. And absolute frustration, anger in his attempt to get this on. And that's when we first started to question these. And then a really nice study came out. Really nice study. And this study took many tourniquets and it ranked them based on different criteria. And some of them I've already mentioned earlier, the ease of use, the duration, how effectively does it occlude blood flow. And there were several factors, and they scored them on a scale from 1 to 5. And routinely, this tourniquet scored in the lowest. And when you looked at the total score, this tourniquet was the bottom of the list, and it actually fell under not recommended for use in that category. So when you think about, is there anything left practically for this to be used on, and then getting back to my point, Athena House, she recommends ACE wrap. It's fabric, it's easy to use, it's going to have the same effect as this.
Right.
She advocates just the use of ACE wrap. She does not like these in our dog kits, so therefore, I don't have them anywhere. I personally, I agree with that. She's the expert on that situation as far as the canine use goes, and so it's come out of our kits, and we really we've taken them out of all of our training supplies, at the company as well when we teach our course. So again, it might be another one, each their own. When these first came out, people loved them, and it was brought to me. We actually had a group that went and did the training before I was able to go, and they came back and started talking about the SOF-T, and they showed it to me. And at the time, I said, that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. But they pushed it, and I thought, okay, I can get used to it, and I used it for a little while, but then the more we used it, and the more we tested it on students, and the more we saw it fail, and the more we saw it being very difficult to use, and then the study came out, that was it for me, and kind of moved on from the SOF-T. So
Sure.
A good idea, I think, in theory, but in practicality and reality, I don't think that's something I'm going to have in my kit for sure.
Makes sense. Cool. Any other closing arguments or thoughts on these?
I don't think so. I mean, just again, this is all, a lot of this stuff comes down to personal preference, but also when people talk about the personal preferences, I hope they do take into account, other people's experiences, their own experiences. And I'm a big study data research guy. It's out there. If you look for it, you're going to find the study I referenced as far as those tourniquets goes. And, when I look at this table, there's some good tourniquets here, there's some bad tourniquets here, there's probably some debatable tourniquets here. But my 3 all-stars right now are certainly going to be the SAM, the SOF-T, SOF-T wide, and then it's going to be the Cat 7. The Gen 7 is winner just about every time, with a very close coming up, more to be determined on this ETQ from the Snake Staff Systems. Pretty impressive first couple go-rounds I've had with that, and I'm certainly going to be playing with that a little bit more.
Awesome. But thank you again for coming on and sharing some expertise.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
If you guys are looking for this equipment, we've got some. I assume you guys have it as well.
We do not retail right now for the TriMed, but that has been a big discussion, and stay tuned.
All right, stay tuned. You guys do courses.
We do.
So check that out too. It's fun making holes, but people often forget about this part, the fixing holes. Yeah. So if you've got all the other kit, this is something you really should spend some time on. I think this is a good discussion to have. So check out hrttacticalgear.com. And then you guys have a website?
TriMedTactical.org.
Perfect. So thanks for checking out the video. Swing by and check out some gear and some training.